Welcome to the Pharmacy Future Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Future Leaders is part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, focusing on pharmacy student perspectives, interviews, and the future outlook of our pharmacy industry.
Hi, this is Kevin Hope. I'm a pharmacist and clinical pharmacy education specialist with PharmCon, freece.com, and you are listening to the Pharmacy Podcast.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I am your co-host, Tony Guerra, for the Pharmacy Future Leaders Podcast, broadcasting from the Des Moines Health and Public Services building at DMAC's Ankeny campus. Connect with me via Messenger on Facebook at TonyPharmD1, or you can find over 1,200 pharmacy videos at TonyPharmD on YouTube, or my website, memorizingpharmacology.com. Kevin T. Hope, RPH, is a clinical education specialist with the PharmCon team in Conway, South Carolina. He served as an adjunct faculty member for the South Carolina College of Pharmacy. Most recently, he has directed the pharmacy technology program at Horry Georgetown Technical College in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and he received the Pfizer Leadership Award and Innovative Pharmacy Practice Award from the South Carolina Pharmacy Association. He serves on the professional advisory board for Paradigm Publishing, and Kevin's passions lie in helping students, pharmacists, technicians surpass personal education goals. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast, Kevin.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, I'm going to start you right off with everyone's leadership road is a little bit different. Tell us what you're doing now and how you got to there.
Sure. Right now, I am working with freece.com. It's a subsidiary of a company called PharmCon, and we offer continuing education credits for both pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, and also nurses. And so this is a new role for me. This is one that I've taken over, but education in itself is not a new role, but certainly one that I have enjoyed over the years. So just to give you a little bit of background of kind of how I got into education, I was started in pharmacy many, many years ago in the 90s, and I became a pharmacy tech. And becoming a pharmacy tech at that time just meant that I was working at Ecker Drugstore, stocking candy one day, and someone in the pharmacy quit, and they ordered me a white lab coat and a little sign that said pharmacy technician with my name beside it, and that's how I became a pharmacy technician, and that's how I became interested in pharmacy. Fortunately, we're kind of moving away from that, and I am ecstatic to really be kind of in that effort and to help move pharmacy technician education along to the next step, as well as a number of people in our profession, in our community. And one of those things is through continuing education. So my own path through education kind of went through pharmacy school, stint in retail with Ecker Drug, and then I started working in a nuclear pharmacy in Charleston, South Carolina. And at that time, there was an authorized user program at the Medical University of South Carolina, and the instructor who was teaching that program had to leave, and they had a number of students who were in the middle of their program, and they didn't have anyone to teach nuclear pharmacy. So they called and asked if I would teach nuclear pharmacy. And teaching was not something that I had done before, but as I started doing it, it was something that I really enjoyed and something that our company continued to offer there for a few years. And that's kind of how I got into the aspect of teaching. And when the position came up at Horry Georgetown Technical College to direct the pharmacy technician education program there in Myrtle Beach, my family and I moved to Myrtle Beach, and that's ultimately how we ended up here on the South Carolina coast.
I talked to Brandon Dyson of TLDR yesterday, and although these podcast episodes will be maybe a week apart, and he said that he had initially had not much interest in oncology, but the opportunity came. So it sounds like you were really flexible and open to opportunities coming out of pharmacy school. How did you get that nuclear pharmacy opportunity? Because so many people are looking for kind of that specialist opportunity. What was it that happened that this opportunity came to you?
You know, and that's a great question, Tony. And I think a lot of times it's just kind of being brave enough to step out of the box and try something new, to be perfectly honest. And in my case, I think I was more kind of forced out of the box because I was just getting so excruciated with things that were going on, like in the retail setting at that particular time, and particularly within our company at that time. and I was really just looking for a way out. And I had, kind of, this is what I'm accustomed to doing. This is what I know how to do. It was a big step to go into something that I really knew very, very little about at the time, and that was nuclear pharmacy. But I had a friend who was working in the industry, and they had a position come open. He called and said, "Hey, I think you would be really good at this. Is this something you would be interested in?" And because of all the other things going on, I was like, "Yeah, let's go through and check this out." And 13 years later, I worked in nuclear pharmacy for 13 years, and not anything that I regret at all. And so it really is quite often just a matter of having the courage to kind of step outside of your comfort zone a little bit and look in and say, okay, what else can I do? And you'll be surprised often what you can do.
I think I have maybe a kind of a sci-fi picture of what a nuclear pharmacist does. So maybe you could tell us what they actually do on a day-to-day basis. I have this just picture of someone walking into this very concrete compound with the hazard nuclear sign on the door. They go in through many security checkpoints. They go into work. They're not allowed out for maybe a couple of days, and then things happen. So what does a nuclear pharmacist actually do? What's it actually look like on a day-to-day basis? Because I have no idea, and I would really love to actually maybe know what that is.
Sure. Well, aside from not being let out for a couple of days, that part of it may be true, but it's one that I found that many of our professionals within our profession didn't understand what we did, and quite frankly, I didn't understand what I was getting into when I signed up to be a nuclear pharmacist. Nuclear pharmacy is a niche within the profession that sort of combines the skills of like in radiology with the skills of pharmacy. And so most of the time we're looking for an agent that's going to be used as a radio tracer. So for example, let me give, I always like to use this particular example. Nuclear pharmacy is really good at determining function. So it's kind of like if you were driving your car and you break down on the side of the road and you pop the hood and there's so much you can see. And sometimes you can see like, okay, there's a belt that broke here and this is exactly what happened. Medicine is the same way. Patient gets sick and quite often they can go and they can do something like an ultrasound and they can see, okay, yeah, there's gallstones there in the gallbladder. We see what's wrong. But often, that's not the case. Just as like you break down on the side of the road, you may very, very well pop the hood and look under the hood and see, there's nothing visually wrong there at all. And so you have to have the car towed into the shop and they put it on a machine and they're able to see what's not working on the car. And that's very much what nuclear medicine does. And using that example of the gallbladder, then we have an agent that acts like bile. So you can actually see the bile being ejected from the gallbladder. So this tells us like, okay, hey, this patient has all these gallbladder symptoms. We did an ultrasound. There's not any gallstones. In years past, they would have taken the patient's gallbladder out, and if that wasn't it, the patient's still sick, and then they say, okay, what else are we going to do? Now we can actually watch that gallbladder functioning to say, well, the gallbladder's working. We don't need to do that surgery. So there are lots of different things. If there's an organ you have, there's probably a radio tracer for it, and every one of those almost exclusively is looking at how those organs are functioning. We also tagged red blood cells and white blood cells, which to me was fascinating, that you can isolate a patient's white blood cells and then tag those with radioactive material and see where it's going in the body. So lots of interesting things, and not exactly what most people think about when you say pharmacy, but nuclear pharmacies are pharmacies. They are regulated by the state boards of pharmacy, as well as many other regulatory agencies, as you can imagine, but definitely something that employs pharmacists and pharmacy technicians on a regular basis.
But no drive-throughs, no insurance plans.
No drive-throughs. Yeah, no drive-throughs, no insurance plans. Yeah, the customers, if you will, are the hospitals and the cardiology clinics, the endocrinology clinics, all of those things. And so quite often the nuclear pharmacists will get contracts with a big hospital system, for example, and they'll service all of those hospitals. The other thing is nuclear pharmacies tend to be concentrated in big cities, or at least there's not an overabundance of them in the state. In South Carolina, for example, I believe there are maybe 3 nuclear pharmacies, and so each one kind of sets up and they'll serve a geographic area like around that you kind of draw a circle around, where you are, and that's kind of how the pharmacies tend to operate.
Okay, so you went from working as a practitioner for 13 years, but then you decided or had the opportunity to become an educator. And you had 13 years, so you had the 7-year itch, said, nah, that's all right, I'm good. And then you had the 7-year itch again. And so now at around 14 years, you made this transition. Tell me a little bit about that transition. I know some people are looking to transition out of a job that maybe they did enjoy, but they're just looking for something a little bit different. Tell me what attracted you to the pharmacy technician educator role, and then, how was it making that transition?
I am not one for normally to embrace change, and it's hard, like when kind of daunting when you're looking at, okay, well, I'm going to go from what I know I'm doing, this is working well for me, to I'm not sure how this is going to work. But in every case that I've stepped out and kind of made that decision to say, okay, I'm going to do what I really want to do and kind of put these other variables to the side, I've never regretted it. And the same was true moving from the position in nuclear pharmacy then to the role with the pharmacy directing the pharmacy technology program at one of our local community colleges. Teaching for me was something that I had really enjoyed when I was working with the medical university through the nuclear pharmacy program, and it was one that I was continually seeking opportunities for. I was asked a lot to do different continuing education programs. I did some training through our nuclear pharmacy workplace for other people to go out and give continuing education programs across the country on nuclear pharmacy. So it was something that I was always trying to kind of work into my job, if you will. And so when I saw this opportunity come up, it was kind of like, this is exactly what I want to do. There were lots of variables. It meant moving. It meant all of these other things. And so the next step was like, okay, let's take a deep breath and let's do it.
So then you go from becoming an educator in an institution, but now you're your work day is education every day on a very different level, and I feel like it's a national level where now you are able to articulate all of the skills that you've had over the years, and you've been in pharmacy a long time, right, since high school, and so now you're able to take that. Tell me a little bit about your role now with Free CE and how this kind of evolved, or it kind of evolved as your path, because what I'm finding is that there's the path that you think you're going to take, and then there's a path that you actually take. So tell me a little bit about this path that you've actually taken.
Absolutely. And I'm the prime example of that. And that is, we moved, a family moved to the Myrtle Beach area for the to direct the pharmacy technology program here at our local community college. It was within a couple of years. Enrollment numbers were low, which has been a common problem among programs across the country, as I understand. And they decided to discontinue the program there at the college. And so now it's like, okay, now you have to look back and say, okay, well, should I have done that? And you can look back all that you want, but in the end, everything is an experience, and everything kind of one thing leads to another. And I wouldn't trade the experience that I got there in that role for anything. It led ultimately to my position here at freece.com. We're located just outside of Myrtle Beach. And again, as you said, it is a national company, and we provide continuing education programs for pharmacists, technicians, and nurses. And so part of my job here is to put together programs that are of need. And there are states across the country that require different things. Most recently, for example, we have Florida is renewing at the moment. And so the state of Florida requires a 2-hour education program in medication safety. And so that was one of the initiatives that I put here. One of the first things that I was asked to do was to put together a 2-hour program on medication safety. I always learn so much when I go through and start researching these things, and I really enjoy putting the programs together for people. The other thing that I do is if we have a topic that comes up that I am not by any means the expert on, if we have, say a need for an oncology topic, for example, that would not be something that I would feel real comfortable jumping in as the expert, so to speak, to deliver a continuing education program on oncology. But, we have lots of resources, and so I would reach out and find someone who would be able to do that as, as an adjunct speaker for us. So my role here is a little bit two different pieces, if you will. And so it's putting the CE programs together, presenting the CE programs in a live format online, and then finding speakers for some of the programs.
So tell me a little bit about this creativity component. When you think of pharmacy school in terms of the pre-pharmacy, you're required to take X classes, then you get in. And then in pharmacy school, in many ways, it's really scripted, no pun intended. But then when you get to that fourth year, you have some flexibility with your experiential learning. There are certainly required ones. But nowhere in there is really this kind of design thinking, creativity thinking, learning, Maslow's hierarchy, those types of things with education. How did you become an educator? How did you get your creativity component? Because it sounds like that's really satisfying to you. But how did you get that training, or how did you learn all of this?
And a lot of it was trial and error, finding out what worked with students and what didn't. Come up with some great ideas, and then you present those in the classroom and say, hey, well, that really did not work very well, so I'm not going to do that again, or I'm going to try it this way. And so some of it was trial and error. A lot of it was watching other people. I learned a lot by watching, and so if I see a presentation being made that's real engaging, that kept my attention, I try to think, okay, well, what are some of the things they did? They started with a real strong opening. They did this, they did that, and those are things that I try to emulate. And so when I see something that I like, it's something that I try to incorporate into my own style. Now, when I was at the community college, one of their big efforts was like on education, because as you can imagine, many people who teach at the community college level don't have training in formal education and training in education. They have training in whatever they're teaching, whether it's nursing or pharmacy or phlebotomy or whatever. And so they did offer lots of different sessions on kind of ways to go about teaching and strategies to use. And I found those fascinating. Some of them I adopted and some I did not. But I always found it interesting to kind of look at and get people's different perspectives and find out what's working for them.
So now you've got this job that you've got autonomy, you've got this creative component. I guess what would you tell someone that's coming out of school? You've got this kind of jagged way of getting to where you got. But if looking back, how would you tell the student to get into a position like this? Because I have a unique position, one of the only ones in the state. Sounds like you have a unique position. Was the I don't want to say the Board of Pharmacy, but the South Carolina Pharmacy Association a part of it? What do you think would be best advice for students coming out now?
My best advice for students coming out would be just not to fear kind of moving forward. And by that, I mean, if it means taking a job that's not necessarily what you really want to do at the time or kind of what you envision for yourself, and you need to take that, take it and learn from it. Everything you do is going to be a learning experience. If the creativity is your thing, like putting programs together or organizing things, find ways in your own corporation to do that. I was reading an article the other day, and they were talking about being an intrapreneur, and I had never heard that word before. But entrepreneur, we're all familiar with, and that's someone who goes out on their own to open a new business or whatnot. But there's the whole idea of being an intrapreneur, and that's taking the resources that are available to you in the company and kind of saying, okay, what can I contribute? What can I do? That's within my skill set. What do I enjoy doing? So, for example, at our company here, I would look at things and say, okay, well, we're not doing as many technician programs on this particular topic. Is this something that I can do? And I would go forward and present that as being an option, and then look at kind of moving into things. So same with your wherever you are, kind of use the talents that you have, use the things that you like doing, use the things that you're passionate about doing, and try your best to try to kind of get those integrated. If you can talk some of the supervisors into letting you do some of these things, most of the time when you're volunteering to do something extra, they're going to be really receptive to that. So that's my advice: is use it as even if it's not where you want to be at the moment, use it for the learning experience that it is. Get everything that you can out of it.
Tell me a little bit about any involvement you have with the South Carolina Pharmacy Association. Here in Iowa, we have a very strong association. I know a number of the leaders there on first name basis, and it's very collegial. Can you tell me a little bit about how the association helps South Carolinians?
Yeah, the South Carolina Pharmacy Association, again, is kind of, and all state associations are really a nice way to go about kind of speaking collectively as one voice. And so, by that I mean, if there are issues that come up in the profession that need to be addressed, you have, all of these different people out there speaking, but if you can have them all together speaking as one voice or as close to one voice as possible, then that always bodes better in terms of when legislatures look at different things as far as changing regulations, changing laws, or when anybody really looks at, okay, how are we going to change these things, whether it's patient safety or anything with regulation. So yes.
Okay. I know people might want to contact you, whether about nuclear pharmacy or understanding CEs, things like that. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Sure. The best way is by email, and it's just kevin.hope@freece.com.
Okay. And then you seem to have it together. I'm just always amazed at how these kind of jagged paths get to this great career, and it seems like you're so satisfied, so happy with what you're doing. But what is it that's maybe your best daily ritual that keeps you on track, that keeps you working at this very high level?
I think it's just that there's always something out there next. Is you put together these ideas, and we get ideas from our clients all the time who say, hey, we need to know about this, we need to know about that. And I think it's the idea of really kind of staying on top of things and hey, let's what can we look at? And we get questions that I don't know the answer to, and so I start researching to find out what the answers to. And it's kind of like one of those, it's a rabbit hole. It's like one thing leads to another, and before you know it, you're really in a different place where you started out, but you've learned so much. And I really enjoy putting that together in a format that I can teach other people. And because I think it's things in the profession can get complicated. There's lots of different pieces, and to be able to kind of take those pieces and put it out and present it in a way that makes sense and in a way that is going to get people's attention, I think is I enjoy that, and just getting that feedback that people were able to learn, people were able to get that experience from something that I did.
You had to have gotten some good career advice along the way. What's the best career advice you've ever received, or the best advice you've ever given?
Okay. Absolutely the best career advice that I've ever received is to put the dollar aside and go with what you want to do. I think a lot of people will get caught up sometimes in, okay, which of these paths is going to pay more, and a lot of people can be really miserable and be paid a lot. And quite frequently, I've found that it's better sometimes to take that step back, look, say, okay, what do I really enjoy doing? What makes me want to go to work every day, and do those things. And it may mean that you're not making as much money, or that you're not doing as much as that you may have done going another route. But I've never regretted following the things that I want to do.
Yeah,
the things that I'm passionate about.
I've had a couple of days where I've looked out that drive-through window yeah, no. Yeah. But what inspires you?
I'm really inspired by people being, let's see how to go about saying this. When I have students who thought that they could not do something, or they kind of come in, they're very apprehensive about even taking on a pharmacy technician training program, or going into to school in general, and they'll say, I'm really bad at math, I can't do math, and to see that student kind of unfold and to be able to say, hey, I'm doing this, I got this. It's kind of like when you're a father and you see your kid like take off when they've got like riding the bike for the first time, and I really enjoy that. And I want to see it as a challenge. Sometimes when I get the students in, and when I can work with those students, and I can see that little moment where, okay, they've got it.
No,
and
it's a great time for sure. Yeah.
And it's that to me is very rewarding. We've seen people who it truly has changed their lives in terms of what they've been able to do to provide for their families, and for even if it was just an encouragement to say, hey, I can do this, and maybe I can go to pharmacy school, or maybe I can be a nurse. It's just that little bit of confidence, that little bit of boost, and to know that I was a part of like helping that happen is really, really special to me.
I know Malcolm Gladwell calls something the tipping point, where all of this happens, and then things take off. But I feel like there's also that little nudge that was so important somewhere in everyone's life, where somebody as a mentor or something was really helpful, as you're talking about, and that's what it was that got them through. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us on the Pharmacy Podcast, and I guess if I had one other question that normally I end with there, but there's one other question that I was just thinking, is that, so do you get to spend a lot of time, I guess, you're at a beach community, and I remember living at the beach and never going to the beach. Do you get to go to the beach? Is your world, close enough that you get to enjoy it?
Yeah. And believe it or not, yes, we do. We go down to the pier probably more than we go down to the beach, even though I guess it's kind of sort of the same thing. But we live probably, our house is about 10 minutes away, and they have this just great atmosphere there, where there's live music almost every night, and it's just a nice place to go and relax. So we go there for that reason. It's a great place to be. Given our storms recently, it was kind of, you start questioning like whether it was wise to have a house 4 miles from the beach. But but yeah, it's a fantastic place to be, and I love it.
All right. Well, thanks again for being on the Pharmacy Podcast.
Thank you, Tony. It's great to talk to you as always.
Thanks for listening to the Pharmacy Future Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag Pharmacy Future Leaders.